Hi, today we will be discussing about agrobiodiversity, which is a very important topic when we discuss the sustainable management of biodiversity. Ever since agriculture was originated way back 10 to 12,000 years ago, a subset of biological diversity evolved. That subset of biological diversity is called agrobiodiversity. This agriculture and biodiversity are interdependent. When you say interdependent, what I wanted to say is that this biodiversity enables evolution of croplands, it enables evolution of farming system, it enables sustainability of agroecosystem, it enables success of agriculture practices. This biodiversity is essential component for agricultural activity. It is very essential, but this agriculture faces a very important challenge as far as biodiversity is concerned. The first and foremost important challenge as far as biodiversity is concerned, it has to sustain the agrobiodiversity, it has to conserve the agrobiodiversity. And second important challenge is that the agriculture practices by itself can cause harm to the biological resources. So the agriculture practices should not cause harm or should not impact the agrobiodiversity. And this agriculture, I said, it is having a close relationship with the agrobiodiversity, and to explicitly say about the interrelationship, we can take an example of sustainable agriculture. This sustainable agriculture, the success of sustainable agriculture depends on the biodiversity, and sustainable agriculture enhances the conservation of biodiversity. So this agriculture and biodiversity is having a close relationship, and it means to say that the agrobiodiversity will form an essential component for the growth and development of agriculture. What exactly the agrobiodiversity is, what it means? It includes many components. It includes all the components of agroecosystem that are essential for food and agriculture. It includes the variability of plants, animals, microorganisms at the genetic, species and ecosystem level that are necessary to sustain various facets of agroecosystem. When I say facets of agroecosystem, it means the structure, it means function, the processes of agroecosystem. So everything encompasses agrobiodiversity. And the main important thing is that all the organisms are responsible directly or indirectly for furthering the food or agricultural activity, and that is the key thing. This is a very essential difference that you can find it between agrobiodiversity and generic biodiversity. And this particular agrobiodiversity, if you look at it deeply, it is a product, it is a product of interaction among the genetic resources, environment, management systems and farmers' practices. This agrobiodiversity, it has evolved thousands of years, it has evolved, so it has taken so much time. So during that process, natural selection process has taken place, and also the human beings were involved, and prime factor for the evolution or for the development for the existence of this agrobiodiversity is human beings. And second important factor as far as the agrobiodiversity is concerned, the genetic resources or germplasm. It includes the plant genetic resources, animal genetic resources and also the microbial component, that all three forms the genetic resources. And the environment, when I say environment, it is a key component because the environment will dictate the evolution of croplands, will dictate the existence of the plant genetic resources, where it is, the way it is, that is because of the environment. The environment will be the deciding factor. The environment, it means that it is the soil environment, it is the abiotic environment, it is the atmosphere. So every component of the environment will dictate the agrobiodiversity, will impact the agrobiodiversity. And as far as the management systems are concerned, agricultural production systems, this agricultural production system, the agriculture practices that also can cause lot of changes in the agricultural resources, the practices, farm practices. So it is better to be the best management practices. If the best management practices are adopted, then the agrobiodiversity can be conserved. And next important force as far as the agrobiodiversity is concerned It is the farmers' practices. The farmers, they have their own practices, farming practices, and those practices also directly indirectly affect the agricultural resources. There are many examples, for example, if you take even a tillage practices, even the tillage practice, the tillage intensity will influence the soil biodiversity, soil flora. And for example, another practice, the agrochemicals, use of agrochemicals. The use of agrochemicals also will influence the natural predators. I am talking about the natural populations, pest populations. So everything will be influenced by the farmers' practices. So this agrobiodiversity in nutshell, it is a product of interaction among the genetic resources, environment, management systems and farmers' practices. In other words, if you see, this agrobiodiversity has different dimensions, and the first and foremost is the germplasm. The second dimension is the environmental dimension. As I said, this environment can dictate, can cause an impact on the agrobiodiversity. And third important dimension is the socio-economic and cultural dimension. The socio-economic and cultural dimension means what? It means the human action, human activities, as a human beings, as a farmer, what he does in the agriculture field, and that also influences the agrobiodiversity. And this agrobiodiversity is essential for the livelihood of the farmers. So since it is essential for the livelihood of the farmers, they also can contribute for the conservation of agrobiodiversity. The agrobiodiversity has a lot of importance in agriculture. The first and foremost important is it is responsible for the production of food, fiber, fuel, fodder and biofuel and many other factors. So our existence depends on the primary producers. Our existence depends on the agriculture. The agriculture is dependent on agrobiodiversity. For example, in India, if you see, way back in 1966, the production was only 75 million tonnes, but now we have crossed 270 million tonnes. So this change in the production statistics, that is because of the efficient use of agrobiodiversity. Efficient use of agrobiodiversity means it has been incorporated for developing new crop varieties, new crops. And second importance of agrobiodiversity is the maintenance of agro-ecosystem services. When I say agro-ecosystem services, every ecosystem provides certain services on account of its function. As far as agro-ecosystem is concerned, it is having a unique services, that is the foremost is the nutrient cycling. Nutrient cycling is a very essential component of agro-ecosystem. Success of agro-ecosystem depends on nutrient cycling. The water flow, the soil management, soil environment management, soil fertility, even the existence of the valuable beneficial microorganisms in the soil, that also depends on the agrobiodiversity in nutshell. And many other factors. For example, the services of a pollinator. If you see world over, the global production, agriculture production, 35% of agriculture production is dependent on the pollinators. See how important the pollination, the pollinators like the birds, the bat, the butterfly. So how important their role is for agriculture production. So that is made possible by maintaining the agrobiodiversity. And third important factor as far as the agrobiodiversity is concerned, it is the adaptation to the changing environmental condition. The first and foremost factor as far as the agrobiodiversity is concerned, it provides the platform or enabling factor for, it provides the adaptation genes, and because of this the crop plants can be adapting to various environmental conditions. That is the first and foremost facet of domestication, and that is made possible by agrobiodiversity. The environment can be anything else, anything like frost, I mean it will be in high temperature or low temperature conditions, or climatic change conditions, or the soil environmental conditions. So in every or most of the environmental conditions, the agrobiodiversity will provide the adaptation features, adaptation traits, and that is a key thing as far as the agrobiodiversity is concerned. To cite an example, rice is a very important crop, staple crop in our country, and elsewhere also it is a very important crop, rice. And this particular rice crop was severely affected by a pest, grassy stunt virus. It is a disease causing organism, and this, because of this thing, in the southern Asia and Southeast Asia, this crop was severely damaged. And what happened? The people went for the resources, agricultural biodiversity resources, and they found a species Oryza nivera. From that particular species they got the resistance, and when they bred this Oryza sativa and Oryza nivera, and the product was developed the resistant variety, and that resistant variety is how because of the use of wild species, and that just because of the development of a pest resistant variety or improvement of a variety, what happened, the particular rice variety was in a position to sustain, adapt in the changing environment. And next important factor as far as the agrobiodiversity is concerned, it is the livelihood security, and agrobiodiversity enhances the livelihood security. It provides all the possible resources for the farmers, for all the stakeholders, and this agrobiodiversity is so much so important that everything is driven by the resources, agricultural resources, the croplands, the domesticated animals, or even the soil microorganisms, everything will be driven by this particular agrobiodiversity. When you look at the status of agrobiodiversity world over, the species diversity, if you put it, it is around 14 million species, and within that thing, if you look at it, there is only 1.75 million approximately it has been classified, it has been documented. Rest has not been documented because it is a time taking process. And as far as the Indian agrobiodiversity is concerned, India can boast definitely, because it is having more than 8% of identified higher plant animal species. It is having, our country is having 17,500 plant species, and it is present in the 16 major vegetation types, and our country is having 33% of species which are endemic in nature, which is found in only in our country. Agrobiodiversity, as far as our country is concerned, it is rich in agrobiodiversity. More than 12 croplands and few animals have been domesticated in our country, and in our country you can find more than 380 cultivated crop species and more than 130 breeds of domesticated animals and poultry. Our country is known for the rich diversity in the crops, the croplands and other economic plants. When I say other economic plants, it includes the medicinal plants, it includes the ornamental plants, it includes the tree crops, forest trees, so many crops brought under, it is a very important thing, economic plants when I talk about it. And also our country is rich in the agroecosystem, the diversity, the agroecosystem that we are finding in our country is very diverse. And when I say it is diverse, that is an essential component for the success of agriculture. The diverse agroecosystem can be exhibiting the features of crop assemblages, the features of coexistence of organisms, the features of stability, features of highest productivity, the features of health, ecosystem health. When I say ecosystem health, the health of the agroecosystem can be measured by knowing the agrobiodiversity. So the diverse agroecosystem is a very essential component, and when the agroecosystem is diverse, it means that it has been using more of resources, crop resources. When it is using more of crop resources, what happens? The product, that is the farm produce, that will be also very diverse. When the diversity is existing in the farm produce, that will increase the income of the farmers, that will increase the livelihood security of the farmers, that will provide a diversity in the diet, that will provide the nutritional security. So the agroecosystem, the diversity that is existing in agroecosystem is very essential. And on other hand, the ethnic agroecosystem, when I say ethnic agroecosystem, it can, for example, you can say the homesteads, home garden, that is kitchen garden. So that exhibits wide variety of croplands. You can find nutritional crops, for example, it can be a vegetable crop, it can be a fruit crop, it can be a medicinal plant, it can be a leafy vegetable. So the diversity exists in the homesteads. Since there is a diversity in the homesteads or an ethnic agroecosystem, the ecological balance is maintained. When the ecological balance is maintained, what it means? It means that other components of the agroecosystem also will be benefited, and that is a unique feature of ethnic agroecosystem. Our purpose is that whatever we are having the ethnic agroecosystem, that has to be conserved. Not only that thing, we need to conserve and also preserve and further we need to pass on the best unique features of ethnic agroecosystem to other places, so that the farmers will be getting the benefit of it. And as far as the agroecological regions are concerned, our country, if you see, it is divided into 21 agroecological regions, and the division of this agroecological regions is based on the climatic condition, is based on the soil environment, it is based on the length of the growing season, the growing periods I am talking about, the crop plants. So these agroecological regions, if you look at it, that is India, in India we have 21 agroecological regions, that itself signifies the diversity that is existing in our country as far as the agrobiodiversity is concerned. And second important thing is that this biodiversity can be very well demonstrated in the traditional agroecosystem. As I told, this agroecosystem, the traditional agroecosystem exhibits the crop assemblages, they exhibits the variability in the soil environment, it exhibits the variability in the soil fauna, it exhibits what not, everything it exhibits. That means that this traditional agroecosystem is diverse, and that is to be taken care of, and that is to be copied, or in other words, it is to be mimicked in the modern agriculture practices. We will be moving towards the nature. So in that sense, it is very, very essential, because when we are moving towards the nature, the health of the system, the productivity of the system, that will be enhanced. And very important factor I wanted to stress at this time is in the traditional agroecosystem or the diverse agroecosystem, the ecosystem will be resilient, will be resistant to perturbations. So in that sense, this is very, very essential. We need to focus on this traditional diverse agroecosystem, and in that ecosystem the pest populations can be managed naturally by the natural enemies. Natural enemies can be the predator, it can be a biocontrol agents, it can be many other factors, predators, parasites, there are many, parasitoids also is there. So these natural enemies will be in a position to manage the pest population. So there is less use of external inputs. Because of that thing, the health of the ecosystem, agroecosystem, is maintained. This agrobiodiversity is so important, I mentioned earlier, but it is facing a lot of losses. The main factor as far as the loss of agrobiodiversity is concerned, that is land use changes. The land use changes is the prime factor that is causing loss of agrobiodiversity, and this factor will remain so till 2050. The land use changes is because of increase in human population, because of increasing the dietary patterns, because of increase in the urbanization, industrialization, many factors, that is symptomatic of human population, increasing human population. And this increasing human population, because of that thing, there is a change in the habitat. The change in the habitat, that means that the agricultural habitat that has been converted into other uses like urban environment, industrial environment. So this causes a change, and because of this change, land use change, the agrobiodiversity is at loss. Next factor as far as the cause of concern or creating a loss of agrobiodiversity is resource availability. Water is a very, very essential resource, and the lack or lesser availability of water can cause harm to the agrobiodiversity. It can cause harm to the human population, it can cause harm to the agricultural resources also, but as far as the agrobiodiversity is concerned, it can cause severe harm. So that will lead to loss of agricultural resources, biological resources. And one important factor I was mentioning as far as the modern agriculture is concerned, that modern agriculture is driven by the use of fertilizers, inputs, agrochemicals, and this agrochemicals, if it is overused, that can cause harm to the soil environment. Soil organisms will be affected, it can affect the natural populations. I am talking about the predators, parasites, that will be affected because of use of agrochemicals, and this overuse of agrochemicals in longer run, that will cause lot of harm to the agricultural resources. And a new phenomenon that is found recently is the climate change. This climate change can cause lot of harm to the agriculture as such, but it can cause lot of harm to the agrobiodiversity also, because the agrobiodiversity is vulnerable to the change in the temperature, change in the precipitation, change in the sea surface temperature, change in the sea level. and many other factors, because these are all the products of climate change, and all the products of climate change will affect the agricultural resources, agricultural biological resources. Another drivers as far as the loss of agrobiodiversity is concerned, as I told you, the population pressure, human population pressure is a very, very important thing. Simultaneously, a new phenomenon, that is consumerism. These two forms the indirect drivers of loss of agrobiodiversity. So when we discussed about the loss of agrobiodiversity, what next? We need to think about the conservation of agrobiodiversity. In nutshell, if you look at it, the basic phenomenon as far as the basic features are concerned, there are two types of conservation strategy. One is the ex-situ conservation, the other one is the in-situ conservation. Ex-situ conservation, it talks about the conservation of agricultural biodiversity in the, or in other words, it is outside the natural habitat. Outside the natural habitat, this agrobiodiversity will be conserved, that is ex-situ conservation. There are many ways. The first and foremost way is that seed banks, community banks, field banks, DNA banks, cryo banks, seed museum, herbaria, these are all many approaches are there. In these seed banks, what happens, these agricultural resources, agrobiodiversity will be conserved in the form of a seed. In the tissue culture, in vitro banks, this will be conserved in form of propagules. In community banks, the community will be involved in conserving the seeds. In the field banks, it is a clonal collection, so wherein the vegetatively propagated plants, crop plants will be conserved in fields. In the field, for example, the crops, the temperate fruit crops, it's conserved in a field bank at Shimla or Akola, Jodhpur for arid fruits. There are so many banks are there in our country itself, wherein these vegetatively propagated plants are conserved. And there are DNA banks, there are cryo banks. These cryo banks uses or conserves the seeds or even the pollens or the propagules. It is conserved at a very, very low temperature. The temperature can be even minus 196 degrees centigrade. This temperature, the low temperature, is made possible by use of nitrogen, liquid nitrogen, and under this low temperature, the seed, it can be the recalcitrant seed or an orthodox seed, it can be saved or stored or conserved for a longer period of time. And another conservation strategy as far as the agrobiodiversity is concerned, it is in-situ conservation. When I say in-situ conservation, the best example is on-farm conservation of land races, wild relatives, and this is made possible by the incentives, by the encouragement of the farmers. The farmers themselves are attached to the agricultural practices. It is a way of life for them. So what they does, they themselves come forward for conserving the land races. They develop the land races. They are responsible for the development of land races, and they conserve the wild relatives also. And this is a very, very important strategy, because this in-situ conservation focuses on conservation of agricultural biodiversity in their own natural habitat. And because it is in the natural habitat, it is conserved, that because the crops also will be evolving, the plants will be evolving, because we are not stopping evolution in in-situ conservation. And next example as far as the in-situ conservation is gene sanctuaries. That one best example as far as gene sanctuary is citrus. In the case of citrus crop, a gene sanctuary is maintained in Nokrak. It is a biosphere reserve in Meghalaya. And also the sanctuaries of rhododendron orchids that is found established in Sikkim. So this is a very, very important component of in-situ conservation. To sum up, the system, agroecosystem, the stability of agroecosystem, the resilience capacity of the agroecosystem is solely lying on the agrobiodiversity. Agrobiodiversity is responsible for the stability of an ecosystem, resilience of an ecosystem. The farmers' communities are custodians of and managers of agrobiodiversity. The farmers' community, I mean to say, we need to use their knowledge, local knowledge, traditional knowledge, that is very, very important for agrobiodiversity management. And for that, the on-farm conservation strategies, we need to develop those strategies. And when we develop those on-farm conservation strategies, as I told you, that the evolution of croplands is not curtailed, and certain unique species which can survive only in their natural habitat, those species can survive. That forestry species they can survive only in those natural habitat, and certain species which demands a unique pollinators, they can survive. Certain species which is having a unique breeding behavior, reproduction biology, and those species also can survive only in their natural habitat, and that will be possible if you go for in situ conservation. And on farm conservation, that will be success, the complete success will goes to the farmers. So they should be provided all the awareness, they should be given all the basic knowledge for conserving the plant genetic resources at the farm level. This agrobiodiversity, as I told you, it is very important, because this will forms an enabling feature for the croplands. The croplands can adapt itself in changing environmental conditions, they can sustain in varied environmental conditions. For example, I said the change in the climate, for example I said what you call the soil environment. The soil environment, when I say when there is a loss of soil productivity, in that case also this agrobiodiversity will have a way, by that way what happened, we can definitely develop a cropland that can survive even in the lesser soil productivity conditions, and that is a very essential phenomenon, because when you see in Indian condition, because the soil fertility is a very important factor, and that is an important component of soil productivity also. And when you talk about the soil fertility in our condition, in our country, if you look at it, the micronutrient deficiency, it is very rampant. And under this condition, if the croplands are developed which can survive under low micronutrient deficient condition, or in other words they are in a position to capture, or in other words they are in a position to mobilize the micronutrients, that will be great, and that will be possible by using or capitalizing the wild species. They may have the productive genes, they may have the valuable genes to use the nutrients that is available in the soil. And this agrobiodiversity is an essential component for ensuring food and nutrition security. I said that food security, which depends on the availability, which depends on the accessibility, which depends on the stability, which depends on what? It depends on the ability of the individuals to take up assimilate the food, and this food security is having various dimensions, and that food security, it can be achieved by adopting this best practices, management practices, and that best management practices will be helping us to use the agrobiodiversity in a best possible manner. And this food security, it is a very essential component, and that will be possible because we know that this, by using this agricultural diversity, agrobiodiversity, we can increase the food production. We can increase the food production, not only the total food production, qualitative foods also can be generated, can be produced, and that is another component of food security, that is nutritional security. When I say nutritional food, when I say because of agrobiodiversity, we were in a position to develop more than 3,000 high yielding varieties in case of croplands. In case of horticulture crops, more than 500 high yielding varieties were developed, and this high yielding varieties both in the croplands and in horticulture crops, what it means? It means that they are having the power to provide the nutrition, to achieve the nutrition security, and that is possible by agrobiodiversity. And next point, as far as the security is concerned, this agrobiodiversity is an essential component for achieving soil security. When I say soil security, the soil fertility, soil productivity and other parameters, other physical, biological, chemical, environmental improvement of this soil, it is possible by adopting the agrobiodiversity. And when I talk about the stakeholders in agriculture, the stakeholders are none other than the farmers. The stakeholders are the scientists, the stakeholders are the human beings, and their existence, their security will be enhanced by using or capitalizing to the best possible way the nuances, the uniqueness of agrobiodiversity. And in nutshell, what I want to say is that this agrobiodiversity, it's having a lot of potential, and this potential we need to capitalize, and when we capitalize, for that to happen, definitely we need to look at the conservation strategies also. Thank you.